Hi, my name's Kara-Leah from the Yoga Lunchbox, and today I'm here with Daniel Aaron. Now, Daniel is one of the founders of Radiantly Alive. He is a yogi, an author, a chocolatier, a herbalist, a human potential coach, and he lives in Bali, which sounds pretty amazing. So, Daniel, welcome to the interview.
Thank you, Carly. I'm so excited to be here and honored that we get a chance to talk like this.
Me too. Now, I'd love to ask you about being a chocolatier, etc., but we're actually here to talk about the teacher training. So let's dive into that first, and maybe if we have some space or some time, I'll ask you about chocolate. Sound good?
Great. Yeah, perfect.
So how did you first get into yoga?
Well, I guess there's two parts to my response there. One is kind of on the physical side of it. What most of us think of as yoga now in the West is the postures, the asana, the physical movement. And I got into that in 1995. I was in a bit of kind of coming out of a life crisis for myself, and I'd had some experiences that kind of shook me up a bit. And coming out of that, I was looking for how to get myself on track and looking for how to really understand myself. And I wouldn't have had any of these terms at the time, but really to generate some very positive health in myself. Mm-hmm. And, and the way it happened, prior to that, I'd been into lots of physical movements, and I'd been into martial arts for a long time. And I had this preconception about yoga that it's sort of a pansy exercise kind of thing. And so a couple of people, had said, "Oh, come to yoga," and I'm like, "Nah." And then, as I was coming out of that period, there was a guy who was kind of a sponsor or like a big brother to me, and he took me under his wing, and he was helping me out a bit. And he said, "Hey, this weekend we've got a fire walking ceremony, and I want you to come." And I thought, no way. I'm not fire walking. No thanks. And he said, "Come on, you don't have to actually walk, but we got the whole day together. It's a great group of men, and it'll be really great." So I said, okay. I didn't have any excuses. And as part of the preparation for it, this guy taught a yoga class, and it completely changed my perspective. One, because it was really challenging, and I was way out of my depth. And two, I don't know, there was something subtle just sparked in me, like, oh, there's something to this. So that's sort of one part to the answer. The other part goes back a little further and is a little more subtle, which is, I guess it was just when I'd started college. I was 17 years old, and I got very interested in, I was studying philosophy and ethics, and I went to write a paper on animal rights and medical testing, and came across all this stuff on vegetarianism, which I was not interested in at all. I was, standard American diet, SAD, and ate meat like 2 or 3 times a day. But something really struck me with that information, and and that really, I think of that in a way as the beginning of my life, the beginning of my yoga life, because it was like a crack in the windshield of my perspective. And when you get that just little crack, that then no matter what you do, that crack is eventually going to spread out, and eventually the windshield's going to come out. So my perspective and immersion into vegetarianism didn't immediately lead me into any other aspects of yoga. And again, I didn't have any words for it or phrasing for it like I do now. But then years later, when I did get deeper into yoga, I got quite obsessed with it. Then I realized that what I was discovering then is related to what we in yoga call ahimsa, and this idea of doing as little harm as possible. And it changed me then. And when I got into that obsessed part of yoga, I was like, that's where it began. Yeah.
I like that, how you talk about, this is when I started asana, but really my yoga started earlier, drawing it back to, like you say, ahimsa. So we'll say you started the asana in 1995. When did you start to think about becoming a teacher, or how did that arise? How did that transition happen?
Yeah, well, I had been a teacher of different sorts. I'd taught martial arts, and I'd taught skiing. I had taught writing, and I taught young children in an educational setting, and so I'd had experience as a teacher. And then as I started getting really into yoga, I had no interest at all in teaching yoga, largely because I felt so inept myself. And, in fact, a friend of mine who was a yoga teacher and ran a teacher training, he said, "Hey, come do our teacher training. You can come as my guest and it'll be great." And I was like, "No way, I don't ever want to teach yoga." And then one day I was living at Esalen Institute in California, and I had a great teacher there and loved practicing and been there for a while. And one day I went to class and he wasn't there. And a bunch of the other students were there, and they said, "Well, you come all the time, so you teach the class." And
that's the traditional way, isn't it? Like, that's the traditional way that people start teaching yoga.
Yeah, it happens that way often.
Yeah, the teacher doesn't show up, or the teacher's going away, and they ask you to cover for them. And
yeah.
So when was that? Do you remember what year? I mean,
that was, I guess that would have been 98 or so. So just a few years after I started learning the practice myself.
And so when you began teaching yoga, what were you teaching your students? Because it sounds like you already had a pretty clear idea that yoga is not the asana.
Well, I don't think I really had that formulated at that point. So in the beginning for me, like it is for a lot of people, when I got into it in terms of, in 95 and learned about the physical practice, it was, I wanted to develop the physical practice, and I wanted to be able to, I wanted to not be the worst one in every class. I was overweight and very stiff, and every class was embarrassing to me, and I was huffing and puffing and struggling. And so in the beginning for me, it was like I just wanted to get like even close to competent. And I had, like a lot of us do in the beginning, I had this like real strong desire to be able to do this pose, and I wanted to be able to put my hands on the ground, or wrap my arms around or whatever it was.
So then when you started teaching, did you find that because it sounds like you came from a less flexible place, did that help to inform the way you taught?
I'm very grateful for being, starting with so little skill and it being such an uphill battle for me. Because, yeah, absolutely, that gave me an ability to understand what it's like for people starting and beginning. And I think for teachers who start out really flexible and kind of able to do the physical part of it, they have a challenge to know what it's like for a beginner.
So then when did you make the transition to teaching teachers? Because that's quite a big, it's a big transition to go from being just a student to being a teacher, but then to start teaching other teachers. How did that happen?
Yeah, there was a specific moment that crystallized it for me, which I'll say in a minute. But prior to that, what happened for me is after I went for a while in the yoga world, and as I said, got really obsessed with it, the logical thing became to do a teacher training. And even at that point, not because I wanted to teach, just because it felt like the best way of deepening for myself. I had some great opportunities. I was living at Omega Institute in upstate New York, and they said, "Hey, we want you to come teach at our Costa Rica place, but you got to be certified, so you can have a month off work and do this training for free." And I'm like, "Whoa, yeah, great! Awesome. What could be better?" So then I just started doing training after training, and it was so fun, and I was deepening, and then a few years later, I went to a class in New York City, and I came out of the class and I ran into my friend Amy, and she said, "So how was the class?" And I said, "Yeah, it was okay. It was good. Like there was a real it was a good physical class. And she said, yeah. And I said,
And
yeah. And I said, well, it's just, I don't know. I feel like there's more possibility in yoga than just the physical. And I would have liked for that, to come out more in the class. And she gave me one of those looks like, as in, and are you going to complain about it or are you going to do something about it? And then it just hit me. I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. And that planted the seed. And it was shortly after that, I don't know, in the next 6-8 months that I ended up moving to Bali. Still with no thought that I was going to teach a training or anything like that, though shortly after I got here, I met a couple of people, and I'd been so inspired by what I'd learned on trainings, and then I'd worked a lot on retreats of different sorts where I taught yoga, or I taught another process I do called transformational breath, and had worked with people and saw like just such amazing results happen for people in this short space of time. Like in a week, people are transformed and will say, this was the most amazing week of my entire life. And so somehow that all came together, and I thought, well, hey, I've got a lot of experience and I've learned some things, and I bet we could put something together that would be pretty cool. And so, that was, I guess, a little over 10 years ago, and we did our first retreat and our first teacher training, and really had no idea what was involved on the practical level. Like, oh, we have to get a website, and promotion, what is that? We have to tell people, and and you know what? I don't know how to teach anatomy. We better hire an anatomy teacher, and it was all this, and we gave ourselves like 4 months to do it, which now it seems like completely wacko because nothing happens that fast. But somehow it came off, and in our very first training, against all odds, we had like 17 people in it, and the people had an amazing experience and were really jazzed after it. And I was inspired too. I was really touched by what they brought to it and what they got out of it, and seeing them transform. And of course, I learned so much from them and in the process that it just created this like momentum to it, and it just started rolling forward from there.
so in 10 years then, how much of the trainings developed and changed over that time?
Yeah, it's really possible for me to say with any accuracy, because I'm a fish in a fishbowl on that. Like I've just, it's all melded together for me. I don't know, though, to attempt the impossible and say, I would say it's massively transformed. Certainly there are core elements to what we do that remains the same now. Like we've always, from the beginning, our model was like, we want a multi-style training, right? We want to explore all these different modern styles of yoga. We also want to get to the kind of the scriptural and historic roots of yoga. We want it to be a personal journey of transformation. Like what we want is for people to have the deepest, most powerful experience of their own beauty and capability that they've ever had in their entire life. And and we said, well, let's bring like the best teachers in the world that we can find and bring them over here to Bali and have them do little sections. And make it an immersion, have everybody live together. And then, because I'd been really impacted by a living food way of eating, we said, let's get a great chef and provide all organic living food for the entire month to help with the transformation. So those elements, remain intact, although within each of them they've evolved also. And what's also evolved is that we've just deepened our skills in terms of how to facilitate transformation, which I think is one of the key aspects of successfully training people to be teachers. And I say that meaning whether they're teachers in the sense of they stand up in front of a class and lead yoga classes, but we're all teachers in ways, and we're all leaders in ways in our lives. and we also learned a lot about how to actually get people prepared to actually do the thing of standing up in front of a class and instruct people how to move their bodies, and provide space where they can experience something of what yoga is. That became one of the most fascinating studies for me. Was like, how do people learn? And so I got really interested in accelerated learning, and how do we create it so that they come out of it and say, I can do this, and then I'm going to keep growing as a teacher, but right now I can step out in front of a room with confidence and really provide a great experience. So I guess the shorter answer might be that it's changed tremendously, and in some way it's been a reflection of our growth, myself and all the people that help me to facilitate the whole experience.
Because you're the kind of person that loves learning, right? And just when you get into something, you dive right in there and learn all about it. So I can imagine that when you began to put together training courses, that you would have studied the business of, like you say, accelerated learning, how to teach people in the most effective way. Is that a fair intuition, fair guess?
Yeah, absolutely. I do completely love learning. And, one of the things I always say to teachers in training is, the ones who become the best teachers are the ones who are the best students. And by best, I mean just who are into it and who learn how to be effective at their learning. And that's what facilitates being effective at teaching or instructing or sharing. Yeah.
So let's talk about the 10-day immersion that you're doing in New Zealand. So this is at Mana Retreat in the Coromandel in December. Now it's a level 2 training. What does level 2 mean exactly?
Well, I'd say the simplest way of saying it is this is a training for people who are already into yoga and most likely already have been teaching for a while.
Okay. Do they need to have a 200-hour certificate, or is it enough to, say, be really into yoga?
Pretty much need to have a level 2 certificate. On our website, we've got a kind of a list of prerequisites, and it's hard to say that this is the single thing that defines somebody being adequately prepared for it, because everybody's a little bit different with that. So there could be exceptions to that, but yeah, on the level 1 training, we don't require any prerequisites in terms of experience. Somebody could be brand new to yoga asana, and they've got some prep work to do with reading and such, but otherwise anybody can come. And in some ways that's great, because as beginners, we are generally more open-minded and we have less habits that might get in the way of learning new things. When it comes to the level 2 training, though, we say, look, everybody's got some experience, and we're not no longer saying, hey, this is why yoga might be interesting or valuable or great. We're saying this, you are people who have already dived in. You're into it already, and so we're going to just start our game at a much higher level. And so if people don't have sort of a fitting background or preparation, it just probably would be too overwhelming for them. In which case, starting with a level 1 to get the preparation would serve them better.
Way to go. So when people dive into this 10-day immersion, what are they going to be learning, or what are they going to come out of it with? Like, is it particular areas, or?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few different sort of spokes on the wheel of what people will get in this particular 10-day immersion. In any of our level 2s, there's always it's a chance to really go back to our own practice and be in the student role. Because one of the things that happens for us as teachers is just it's a very normal thing. We start teaching and we get comfortable. And and we start to, like a musician, we play our best hits, and this is the way I teach, and this is what I do, and unless we have strong practice with a somebody who really guides us and teaches us, it's easy for us to get kind of complacent in our own practice. And like we were talking about earlier, if we as teachers aren't growing, then our teaching becomes stagnant. And like one of the basic things in life is to feel most alive and thrive, we have to be growing. So we put a big emphasis in the level 2 on, all right, let's come back to our growth as students, and on all levels, work hard on the mat, and also then work hard on who we are as teachers. So we challenge people when they come to that, to say, hey, it's great what you've been doing, like you've been teaching well, it's got you to this point, and now forget it, forget all of that and wipe your slate clean and become a beginner again. And we really like kind of strip away as much as we can for that 10-day period, which I have so much respect for those trainees, because that's a really challenging thing to do. It's hard to go back to be a beginner and kind of get confronted with, okay, now it's time for me to up my game, to have a new standard of who I am as a teacher. So we do a lot of work on people's teaching individually in small groups, and we do a lot of feedback, and we use video feedback, and we really kind of break things down and find different ways of looking at their teaching and challenging them through exercises that kind of take us out of our comfort zone.
So it sounds like for teachers that feel like, they've kind of got teaching down pat, but they're ready for that next level, and they really want to get that feedback and support of more experienced people, it sounds like it'll be an amazing 10-day experience. Because you don't get a lot of feedback necessarily. Like if you're teaching in studios, not that many studios necessarily give you really good concrete feedback on how to up your game, how to be a better teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to me, just in my own training, and then when I started studying accelerated learning, one of the key tenets is to get good quality feedback, and to have teachers who model, excellence, and who can coach us and guide us. So, and it's absolutely true what you said. Once we start teaching, it's very seldom do we get any feedback or really get opportunities to look at ourselves from another perspective and grow.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daniel. Before we go, though, I do want to ask you about, what is a chocolatier? Do I say it right? Chocolatier? How do I say the word for the first instance?
Well, I've heard a lot of variations, and I love the international world that we live in. So the way I heard it first in the U.S. was chocolatier, and regardless, the way I think of it is, well, I'll give my own definition. So I guess simply it's someone who makes chocolate, and like it's very similar for me with yoga. I got into teaching and training teachers because I was obsessed with yoga, and I was touched by what I got from it. And the same is true for chocolate. When I discovered raw chocolate, and that this old paradigm of chocolate is this thing that's bad for us, when that paradigm kind of destructed, and I realized actually the origins of chocolate are very pure, and it's actually a superfood, and it's really great for us.
I love how you just called chocolate a superfood.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Yeah. That's awesome. And so you make it. You can make your own chocolate using the raw chocolate methods.
Yeah.
Oh. Do you make them for your trainees on the immersions?
We do serve chocolate almost every day on the training, and the chef that we're working with at the moment is phenomenal. I mean, her creativity and what she puts together for the chocolates, it's fantastic. Yeah, it's a highlight for me of the training. I can say that.
You know what? That's a selling point. You should have mentioned that way earlier in the interview. We provide chocolate every day on this training.
Exactly.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much for sharing with me and the Yoga Lunchbox audience. And I'm sure there'll be quite a few teachers who will be very keen to attend that training in the Coromandel in December.
Great. Well, yeah, and I hope so. We're going to have an amazing time, and our greatest aim, and how we measure our success is that what trainees get from the experience is nothing short of extraordinary, and that they leave the training transformed in who they are and transformed in their ability to touch other people. And what I love about it is it always happens. It's there is a science to this process, and we'd have to be idiots not to see what creates that, because we've worked with so many people now and done it over and over again. And it's just so beautiful to see people come and open up and dive in and work, and we have so much fun and see them transform. So yeah, I hope so. We've got a great group lined up already, and it's going to be an amazing experience.